Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be here. So as David's just said, Mark Wilkinson, I'm the NHS Director responsible for life sciences innovation. When we use the phrase life sciences in this context, we mean pharmaceuticals, but not only medicines, also medical technologies and diagnostic technologies as well. There are really three big ideas that I want to get across in the next 20 minutes. And I guess if the previous speaker's pitch was about informatics and informatics as a catalyst for change, mine is really about collaboration, and in particular about collaboration between the NHS and the life sciences industry. So the first of my big ideas is that we need to improve, and the key to that is our ability to collaborate, in my case, collaboration with industry. The second big idea is that we need to develop a business-to-business relationship between the NHS and industry. And then the third big idea I want to get across is that there are some practical steps that we can all take. There are some things that you can do when you get back to your office at the end of this event. So I'm going to finish off with some practical stuff. So that's just a little bit about me. The bulk of my career has actually been in the Northwest, so I'm really delighted to be here. And I suspect I've already seen quite a few people that I know in the audience. So I've nearly always worked in the Northwest. I've been a PCT Chief Executive, originally an NHS Finance Director. In the middle of that largely NHS career, I spent 2 years working in AstraZeneca. And I'm now in my current role, which is a national role, working at the interface between the NHS and the private sector. But it's great to be here in the Northwest. I'm only 20 minutes away from home, so this is fantastic. So all conferences should be in Wigan. Why would you go anywhere else? So why is this topic of life sciences innovation important? Why should we pay attention to it? Well, I guess for the NHS, it's chiefly about productivity and quality. I'm not going to bore you with a set of arguments around the QUIP challenge and the efficiency challenges facing the NHS. I think we're all pretty clear on that now. I've consciously not put the phrase innovation in there, which might seem odd for someone that's got innovation in their job title. But I think it's important to remember that innovation is not an end in itself. It's only good for me if it supports quality and productivity. And in terms of gaining the attention of the NHS over the next few years, it seems to me it has to be about things that can do both those two things simultaneously. I don't think it's enough even to do one of them. So for the NHS, we face our own challenges, but the challenges facing industry are no lesser in their own ways. And I won't kind of rehearse a lot of those, but I know there are some industry colleagues in the room, particularly some perhaps from the pharmaceutical industry, and they face significant challenges about how they can differentiate their products, about the increasing paucity of the R&D pipeline, costs of development, but I guess most significantly, it's getting harder to secure market access as countries across the world, not only here in the UK, increase the barriers before market access can even be secured. And then they've got to deal with all the local NHS stuff to actually secure uptake. So I guess the key point is this: both the NHS and industry need to change. We've both got pressing reasons not to carry on as we are. And the evidence shows us that we innovate together. Can I be bold and try and move this stand? What strikes me is that you're all kind of slightly torn between wanting to look at that. Can I do this? I'm going to cause mayhem, aren't I now? It's not wired up, is it? Because I don't know if you're looking at me or looking at this. It's like watching people play tennis, you know, that kind of when the ball goes over. Yeah, that must be okay, mustn't it? I don't know if that helps. So we need to change, we need to improve, and the evidence shows us that we innovate together. The evidence shows us that we innovate together. And I guess this is a natural message for our Hayek meeting, but I want to underline it. This was a survey that was published in The Economist a few years ago, and private sector bosses were asked to assess the skills that were required for innovation. And first up, unsurprisingly, was creativity. That's what innovation is about. But in second place was the ability to collaborate, whether it's working across team boundaries, whether it's working across different departments, or the kind of collaboration that I'm talking about, which is the hardest of all. It's working across different sectors, different systems, and across public and private sector boundaries. And that's the kind of thing that we find hardest to do. And yet the evidence shows us if we want to innovate, we have to be able to collaborate. When these same people are asked to assess on the right-hand side the organisational factors that help promote innovation, first up, some people factors, as you might expect. But in third place, customer communication. So this is why industry want to work with us. This is why we want to work with our patients, obviously. And then in fourth place, strong supplier relationships. So this is the key point. I guess we probably all accept the need to do things differently and to change if we are to thrive. But innovation requires collaboration and strong connections to customers and suppliers. So I guess the NHS can't do this on its own. And perhaps culturally we sometimes tend to think we can sort our own problems out. But it's probably not actually true. So what I'm describing here, particularly in the context of relationships between the NHS and industry, is a business-to-business relationship. Medicines, in particular, play an absolutely crucial role in the delivery of 21st century healthcare. And medicines as an area of expenditure, if you like, is the second largest area of NHS expenditure after staffing. So medicines are absolutely crucial. But as I taught you through this model, I want you to think about what are our relationships like between the NHS and industry against this kind of framework. So this is a framework for a business-to-business relationship. And it's a pyramid kind of model. You start at the bottom, and then you progress upwards as you improve. So think about what are our relationships like between the NHS and industry. So if we're to have a business-to-business relationship, first off, we need to understand each other's needs. We need to do what we say we're going to do. We need to solve each other's problems to some extent. And we need to have access and personal contact. That's the basis of any business-to-business relationship. I guess you could equally apply all of this, actually, to relationships between NHS commissioners and providers. So you can probably think about this, or between health and social care. So you can think about this in lots of different ways. But when we've got that right, we can progress to some of this stuff. Second level up, shared value exchange. We begin to understand each other's strategies. And this is the key one. Contact at all levels and across all functions. How close are we to having contact at all levels and across all functions in our relationships between the NHS and industry? It's very difficult to generalise. There are clearly many parts of the country where it's really quite good. But I think, if you had to draw a general conclusion, I think you would say we are quite a long way away in terms of the way in which this relationship is currently transacted to having contact across all levels and across all functions. And then when you get to the highest level, deep levels of trust, co-working against a shared vision and all that kind of thing. So I think we've got quite a long way to go in this very significant relationship. It's hard to talk about collaboration and joint working between the NHS and probably pharma in particular, less so medtech actually, without acknowledging the trust issue. The reputation of the pharmaceutical industry globally is still quite low, probably. When I worked in AstraZeneca, I used to look at surveys of reputation of pharma, and this was in the US, not in the UK, although I think it's pretty similar. And it showed, this was in 2008, that kind of pharma was down there with kind of like, banks and arms manufacturers in the lack of esteem. And that is absolutely staggering, isn't it? That's absolutely staggering for companies that have invented so many wonderful medicines that have delivered such a tremendous scale of health improvement. I mean, it's the opposite of what arms industry is about. Delivered huge health improvements. So there's a real paradox here, which is what's making this work kind of so interesting. So some real paradoxical stuff there. But trust is important, and I don't want to duck it. I've come up with this kind of 5 C's model of things that I think we need to get right if we want to get more trust between the NHS and industry. The first is that we need to have contact. When I worked in AstraZeneca, I came across a vice president of global marketing who'd never met a payer customer. A payer customer is their word for us, basically. And he'd become a vice president in global marketing, and he'd never met a payer customer. How can that be? But I know of a really well-networked PCT chief executive who's gone on to bigger and better things, the kind of guy that knows everybody, who said he didn't know a single person that worked in a pharmaceutical company. Well, if we've not got contact, if we're not speaking to each other, then we're not getting to first base, are we? And that's why events like this, which are an opportunity for NHS and industry colleagues to come together, that's where I guess they can be so important. But we also need clarity about what's in it for each party to this relationship. The DH and the ABPI produced some joint working guidance a few years ago about collaboration between NHS and pharma. And one of the things that I really took from that was the importance to be absolutely clear up front about the benefits that are going to accrue from this work. What are the benefits for the NHS organisation? What are the benefits for the private sector partner? And most importantly, what are the patient benefits? So I think there's a big thing about, as we get into this kind of improved relationship, being clear about what the benefits are. I think there's also something about communication, and I think the industry is on a journey to greater openness and transparency, and I think that is to be welcomed. And there's probably a little bit further to go, but communication clearly needs to be full and open if we are to have trust. The fourth C is confidence. There are a number of examples of joint working schemes, of collaborations that have delivered significant benefits, and I'm going to go on to talk about one of them. I think we need to be much better at shouting these from the rooftops and making it seem like this is an activity that is legitimate, that is to be encouraged, because actually it doesn't always feel like that in some aspects of the NHS. Industry would say that there are some PCTs that have got policies of non-engagement with the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not sure that any areas have actually got policies of non-engagement. I suspect some of them may well have policies for handling that relationship, which have the end result of meaning that it doesn't actually happen. So, we get to the end point. I'm not sure that many PCTs have got policies of non-engagement, and I think, frankly, it would be a little bit bizarre, were that to be the case. I suspect, as I say, it's more subtle than that. So we do need to build confidence. And then the fifth C, that kind of highest level, if you like, is kind of collaboration. The idea that we should be aiming to get to 1 + 1 = 3, whereby working together we do more than either party could have achieved on their own. So some thoughts there about how we can get to trust. This is not a quick and easy fix, but some thoughts there about what we might need to do if we are to get greater confidence. And I should perhaps say that I think trust is a two-way street. We tend to talk about it, and the way I just described it then, actually, in terms of how the NHS doesn't trust pharma. I think there are significant challenges for the industry in developing its ability to trust the NHS. So I think it's actually a two-way street, and I don't just want to present it as if it's a one-way thing, because I'm not sure it is. So I've talked about the need to change and the need to be collaborative. I've talked about a business-to-business relationship and what that might look like. I wanted to be just a little bit more practical and talk a little bit about how some of this stuff is happening. I think about collaboration being under three kind of broad headings. The first is collaboration around the medicines and medical technologies themselves. The second categorization is around products and services that are closely connected to medicines or medical technologies. And the third category is skills exchange. And I'll give you a specific example from this part of the country, which is St Helens. St Helens Health is a PBC consortium in St Helens, and GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, coming together to do some joint working, a collaborative venture around COPD. So some of the facts around COPD, which I won't kind of repeat: long-term condition, growing incidence, growing cost to the NHS, and patients not being diagnosed with COPD. The vision that the pharma company and the NHS developed together was first and foremost about improving outcomes for patients by doing some of these things: earlier detection, upskilling staff who work in primary care, making patients feel more empowered. So what did they do in this scheme? Well, they committed a relatively small sum of money, 290k, found between both partners. They developed a new pathway. They trained staff in primary care. They provided equipment, spirometry equipment into primary care, and they introduced an audit software tool, and that was provided by GSK, so that was part of their input. And the reason why I talk about this example was it delivered some quite measurable results, and not all of them have got this level of specificity in terms of the results. So there was already quite a high prevalence of COPD within St Helens, which you would have expected, given the nature of the industrial legacy in that part of the country. But as a result of this scheme, they delivered significantly higher prevalence. Higher prevalence was reported. That's good for the pharmaceutical company, because clearly more patients diagnosed with COPD, opportunity for COPD medicines. The Practice-Based Commissioning Consortium benefited from a 9% reduction in hospital admissions. So under PBR, that was a benefit to the practice commissioners. And those patients that did need to go into hospital actually had a reduced length of stay. They demonstrated higher patient satisfaction, and they also demonstrated a higher level of compliance with NICE guidance and less variation across individual GP practices across St Helens. So that's just one example. To industry colleagues, and I'd like to throw out the challenge of saying, can you give me some more examples of successful NHS and industry collaborations? There are quite a few. This is my stock example, and I quite like it because it's got measurable outcomes. But there's a number of other examples of work going on across the area. So I'd be really keen to receive those and to be able to weave those into to future presentations. So some practical next steps, some things for you to think about. This fundamentally is about local relationships being forged between people that develop confidence and identify a local need and all those kind of things. So I think it is about localness. I don't think it can be dictated or prescribed from the centre. So what I'd say to you is find out what's going on and start speaking to people in your own local areas and see if you can identify a common cause. If you can, fine, collaborate, great. If you can't, I think that's equally good. What I think is less defensible is not having the conversation and not exploring whether there is a potential for collaboration. So I'd encourage that. But the second thing I think to be aware of, and it's perhaps quite a good point to make at conferences like this, where we're kind of bombarded with examples of good practice and people telling us that this is excellent. I think we need to be wary of the dangers of what I've described there as naive transplantationism. Naive transplantationism. This is the idea that because it's worked in St Helens, you can kind of pick it up and transplant it into kind of Doncaster, or you can drop it on Portsmouth or Dundee or whatever, and it will have the same level of results. It's probably not like that. And I think sometimes, I don't know, is this true of the NHS? Sometimes we tend to think we can kind of find the magic ingredient and we can kind of spread it, and the challenge is just to get everyone else to do it. Well, maybe that's not actually true. I suspect a Hayek-related audience is probably pretty convinced on that already. So I think there's something about, yes, being aware of good practice, but actually avoiding this idea of naive transplantationism. You've got to forge it and fashion it and work it out for yourselves. So if you're interested in learning more about joint working and the case for collaboration between the industry and the NHS, there's a DH and an ABPI toolkit that's on the DH website. It's recently been relaunched. It gives you 29 practical examples plus a range of resources to support you in doing that. We're doing quite a lot of work on we're using NHS Networks, which I guess you are familiar with. I guess it's an NHS-facing site with a degree of NHS credibility, but it's also open to everybody. So industry and academic colleagues can become members of NHS Networks as well and register and log on. We've got our own network, and we're looking to gather examples of collaboration and kind of put them out there and promote them to a broader audience. We've got more ambitious plans over time to perhaps use it as a way of facilitating people coming together. So kind of, online kind of matching up process, if you like. But to begin with, let's share some examples of good practice. And then the final practical step I would commend to you is to actually promote benchmarking of NICE appraised medicines. For the last 2 years now, the Information Centre has put out a report looking at the variation in the uptake of NICE appraised medicines. And what you find, and this is no surprise to those with the NHS, colossal variation. So this is on stuff that NICE has looked at and has found to have a degree of clinical and cost effectiveness. For some of the medicines, they only go down to SHA level, so a very high level. Some of them go down to PCT level, but you've still got the most colossal variation across the NHS. This is not about saying what's right and what's wrong. It's hopefully an encouragement to ask some local questions about, what might be the right level, what might be the right area to be for your own area, for your population. Do you understand why you are where you are on that graph? So I would encourage benchmarking as well, and there's a link to a report there. So 3 big ideas I've tried to get across. We need to change the NHS and industry. We need to improve. And key to that is going to be our ability to work more effectively together than we've done hitherto. We need to develop a business-to-business relationship. And I've given some thoughts as to how we go about doing that. And then thirdly, there are some practical next steps that I think we can and should take. Thank you very much.